a little bit about me and what we're going to be talking about today. I originally started out as a journalist, and I kind of moved to the more producty, strategic side of things very early on in my career. I just realized that I was way more excited about co-creating the vessels, the products that we use to get journalism to our users, rather than just filling existing vessels with content, right? So basically what I spent my time with, partly in my role at the J School, but also partly with other things I'm doing, is I'm trying to support leaders and organizations in becoming more innovative, becoming more sustainable, and becoming more product-centric. Part of my side gigs that I do when I don't kind of, as you see in these emojis, spend my time eating a lot, so that's my biggest hobby, is that I think about product thinking. And shout out to Feli Carrique, who is somewhere here. Hello, Feli. The most amazing Argentinian product thinker and CEO of News Product Alliance. If you're not part of NPA, you should become part of NPA, little disclaimer. So why am I excited about product thinking, and why is that something I wanted to talk to you about today in combination with leadership? The reason why I'm excited about product thinking is because what I'm seeing is that the shift to product thinking, the shift to becoming more user-centered in how we build our digital products, in how we design our newsletters, in how we create and distribute our journalism, is actually helping us accelerate culture change in our media organizations. What is culture? What do we mean when we say culture? Well, I think an easy way to explain it is culture is the way we do things, right? It's a lot of these unwritten rules that we all know, all of us who work in newsrooms. It's a lot of these, well, this is not how you do things. It's a lot of the, oh, we tried that, but it didn't work out, right? This is culture. Obviously, sometimes culture is written down in kind of, papers and whatever disclaimers and websites. But very often it's these kind of intangible do's and don'ts that organizations and professions have. Many of you might know this quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I like this quote, and why I like it is because I think it's very true. In many of my managerial roles that I had in newsrooms, like the path to transformation was somehow full of strategy papers that never got executed, was full of strategy papers and PowerPoint presentations that were done maybe with the best intentions, right? But they just ended up in a drawer somewhere. And I think many of us who work in news organizations and newsrooms might have experienced that, right? There is a change process, a transformation process, and it kind of starts with that energy. Then the energy is kind of fading, right? And suddenly it kind of adds up to that pile of never really worked out. Yes, we tried that once, didn't work, kind of failed or at least stuck cultural transformation. So what is product culture? Now we said what is culture, right? What is product culture in my opinion? Product culture, and what kind of product culture you have as an organization, is really about several questions. Product culture is about questions like, what do you build? How are decisions made, which app, which newsletter to build, and which not to build, right? Which team? Who built it? Who is in the driver's seat to make these decisions? Do you have a product team in place? Do you have an editor-in-chief who basically does the old I like it or I don't like it thing? Do you have user-centric work? Do you actually kind of interact with your audience and your users? Do you do research before you build products? All of that is about the how, right? Is your product process user-centered? Is your product process audience-centered? Why do you build it? What do I mean by why do I build it? Well, do you have a strategy in place that helps you distinguish between opportunities you want to take and opportunities you want to pass on? Or is your product strategy basically just saying, well, you know what? The New York Times is doing snowfall. We should be doing snowfall as well. That might work out for you, but it's not the smartest product strategy, right? Ideally, the decision of what to build, when to build it, how to build it, is tied to your metrics, to your strategic goals, to your mission, to your vision. When do you build it? Do you need to be or want to be a first mover? Is your role in the ecosystem, you have to already build something for TikTok before everyone else does? Do you feel you have to be the organization that builds the first journalism brand in the metaverse? Or are you saying, you know what? We actually don't have the resources and the money and the time to be first movers in something very experimental. We'll wait for some others, and then we'll kind of jump on that ship. One of the biggest product questions that I feel gets not enough attention in many newsrooms I work with is, how do you measure success? How do you measure whether the products you built actually achieve their success metrics? Now, the difficult thing about that is I often still see product decisions being made without having had the conversation of what success is first. Now, if you don't decide what success is first, it's going to be very hard afterwards to take a look at your product and take a look at your metrics and your engaged time and whatever you're looking at. You're not going to really know, was that good now? What did we expect? Is it actually better? Is it worse? Was that a success? And what happens then is that you kind of start piling up products and a suite of products that are so-so, right? They are not incredibly successful. They are not totally failing. But they start to kind of pile up and eat resources without being true strategic priorities. Now, all of these things that I've just been talking about basically constitute what I would call your product culture, and every organization is different, right? Now, I don't want to get too theoretical here, but I did want to share one of the most famous change management frameworks by John Kotter, who talks a lot about organizational change, not in the media space, right? Keep in mind, this is like a business school professor who works with all kinds of industries and organizations. And in theory, John Kotter basically said there is only eight steps to successful organizational transformation. It's pretty straightforward, right? You basically start by creating the climate for change, create that sense of urgency, we really need to do something, form a powerful coalition, get some folks on board who are like willing to push for that change, drive that change, kind of your change management team. Create that vision, like create that this is where we want to be if all this works out. The light at the end of the tunnel, if you want. Then you move into the phase of engaging and enabling the organization to actually be successful and happy in that change process. Communicating that vision, communicating that light at the end of the tunnel, empowering and supporting your team to actually take action, creating quick wins. Change processes are very long, so you want to make sure that people stay engaged throughout these processes. And then basically, you should be at a stage where the organization is kind of, in theory, excited to kind of push forward. Last step, but not least, implementing and sustaining the change. Big danger is stopping there and being like, oh, we did the process, right? It's done. We had the one presentation of our new strategy, all good. It's all about sustaining and kind of keeping the communication up, building on the change, helping the employees in the organization kind of cultivate that culture of change, making it stick. Now, this all sounds very kind of structured. And if you look at it, it's like, oh, that shouldn't be hard. We're going to start it, and like 6 months later, we should be at number 8. Now, all of you who worked in news organizations, many of you in news organizations that are rapidly changing, will have experienced change processes, either as leaders or as employees. And if they are anything like the places I worked at, it's never going to work in that linear way and structured way, right? It's way more about this, right? We think successful transformation is like a straight upward line, and then we kind of reach the point where it's done. But what it really looks and feels like is more kind of this weird like puddle of craziness and steps back and steps forward and fears and hopes and people who are excited but then get afraid of kind of losing power in the organization. The reason for that being that we all are human beings, and change ultimately deals with human beings, and human beings are messy and emotional, and we all know that. Let's talk a little bit, and I'm going to bear with me because I'm going to simplify here, apparently. I know that there are old legacy media organizations who are already very much thinking in a user-centric and product-centric way, and I know that there are new startups that are actually not that modern in the way they deal with products, audiences, work culture, and so forth. But for the means of that presentation, I'm oversimplifying. I'm basically looking at old legacy newsroom culture and that new product culture to just make that differentiation here. So let's look at why newsrooms are having such a hard time in that transformation process, right? It's 2022, we spent many years in the industry kind of going through this transformation, and it's taking longer than all of us expected, and there are step backs from time to time, like we all experience. Why is that? Well, because a lot of the ways that new user-centric product culture works is very opposed to the way traditional newsrooms were built and was structured. Let's take a look at some of these differences. The old culture of news organizations is very much a lone wolf culture, right? The time I entered newsrooms for the first time, the pinnacle of one's career was if you got a solo office as far away as possible from like the multimedia newsroom place, right? Ideally, the most important people in the organization were folks who did not have to talk to anyone in the newsroom all day. They went to their nice little office, closed the door, took copious lunch breaks, sometimes came back in the afternoon, sometimes not. That was kind of, the basically pinnacle of your career. You had it when you did that. Now, what we all see is that organizations that are product-centric, audience-centric, and that manage to kind of keep that transformation and innovation going, they work in a collaborative way, right? Digital products are, good digital products are not being built by journalists alone. They are not being built by designers alone. They are not being built in a solo office, right? Collaboration is so essential for everything related to audience and product-centric work. That also plays into is very connected to that next point. Those teams that build products and grow products need to be interdisciplinary. There is simply no human being who brings all the perspectives and all the knowledge, right? This old idea of, well, I'm just going to decide what newsletter, what app to basically push for, and then someone else in IT is just going to build it, and then the designer is going to paint a little, nice little color on it, and that's it. Of course, you can still keep doing that, but you're not going to be successful in the marketplace of digital products these days. So diverse teams with members from various departments, product managers, designers, business analysts, data analysts, editorial, visual folks, build better digital products. Let's talk a little bit about leadership, and all of that obviously is connected to you in your organizations, whether you are formally a leader, a manager, a CEO, or whether you are somewhere in the team and you're leading through influence, you're leading your peers, you're leading through communication with your team members. The newsrooms I grew up in very much cherished an old perception of what strength is, right? Usually strength was shown by being the person in the room, stepping up and saying, I'm the boss, I decide what we should be doing, you all just kind of implement, right? A very old perception of kind of a command and control style leadership that I still see popping up sometimes in newsrooms. Now, obviously, to build successful digital initiatives and digital products, the leadership you need is very, very different from that kind of old perception. And when we think about successful digital organizations, the leadership style they implement is way more about coaching and supporting your team in driving that transformation, delegating and trusting your employees, supporting them in becoming their best selves, giving space to that interdisciplinary collaboration. That's hard work. If you're a leader who grew up in that old world, that transformation is not going to come easy, right? But that brings us to a cultural conflict that's happening in newsrooms now, where specifically Gen Z and millennials are like, well, I don't want the boss to shout at me anymore, right? I didn't sign up for that. I want to have a say and I want to have impact with the work I'm doing. So there is a big kind of cultural component here that's going on all over the world. Perfectionism. None of us want to, from the journalism perspective, make a mistake in a headline and then see that mistake printed in next day's newspaper. I mean, who likes that, right? I sometimes feel that kind of culture of failure thing is being taken a bit out of proportion from Silicon Valley. Like, oh, failure is great, let's celebrate it. Let's be real. No one likes to fail, right? Everyone likes to succeed. But what is absolutely true is that if you don't create space to reflect on failure, to do postmortems, to understand why did this not work? How are we going to make sure that we try better next time? What do we learn from our mistakes? If you don't create that open conversational space to discuss that, to learn, to get better collaboratively, you're not going to get better, right? You're going to be stuck. And that perfectionism is still present in many, many newsrooms, and it's making it very hard to innovate. It's very hard to overcome. Let's move to the more technological and product management side of things. The way that newsrooms traditionally worked was very much like a pyramid, right? Like a waterfall. Someone in the beginning saying, there is something that we should build, then some magic happening in the background, and then someone coming up and saying, okay, it's going to be done in 18 months. The app will be there. No user is going to see it before 18 months. Now, obviously, the danger about that is it's very expensive to make mistakes. You risk that you're building something that's not even valid anymore, a year or a year and a half later, right? That's not even fulfilling user needs anymore. So you kind of take the chance from yourself to actually adapt and pivot and get better. And we see that successful digital product cultures have an iterative way of doing that technological and product development. Then there's something that I'd like to call the egocentric view versus the user-centric view, and it builds on quite a few things that I said before about leadership. There are still a lot of editors and managers out there who think that the best data point is themselves. The best decision data point is, but I think that newsletter would be great. Now, obviously, you might be right? You're one user. You shouldn't be more important than any other user, mind you. But obviously, there is a danger in not including the user-centric view and just assuming that you are right in whatever you're doing. And connected to that point is a dichotomy of classic news organizations being very much driven by gut feeling, like this is how we did things so far and we should just keep doing things, while digital transformation is very much driven and informed by data, right? Very much driven and informed by data points that you collect. Now, I actually don't think this should be a dichotomy, and that's what I want to end on. Our goal as leaders, as product managers in that space, is to actually find that sweet spot, right? Find that sweet spot between traditional media culture, what makes us strong, what makes us special, why we are important, specifically with the threats to democracy we're seeing, and merge and combine that with modern product culture, with audience centricity, with the priority to listening to our user. Our job as leaders is to find that sweet spot and cherish and grow it in our organization. Thank you very much.